Good day everyone, and welcome to the video where I try to explain the information, specifications and features of the nuclear vessel Crown. I will split this video into two segments, that being the specifications and then the features. And we will start off with the more boring one, that being the specifications. Now first we will go over the ship's maneuverability and her top speed and everything about that. The ship can sail at speeds up to 46 knots, and you can see all of that on the hood here that you can turn on by pressing 1. Her high speed is closely linked to her power plant, which is a nuclear reactor. But the nuclear reactor is not what does the magic. The magic is being made here in the steam room with all of the pistons. But it's not only the speed that is good, this thing can also steer well. One thing you need to know is that the amount you can steer decreases with higher speeds. So at 50 knots you will be able to steer less than at, for example, 10 knots. This is made possible due to the ship's 4 fluid jets. But with a real ship it would take her a long time to get to such speeds. That's why I used a momentum damper on the throttle. That thing basically works in the way that if you decrease or increase the throttle, this is going to go slowly down or slowly up. This all makes the ship much more realistic. Let's see how long it will take the ship to get to full speed. So let's start now. And we're up. I have used this on many other ships of mine, but this one has the perfected system. On most of my other ships, if you went into reverse, for example, it would just cut the speed down instantly. On this one, that just doesn't work. So I hope you enjoy this aspect of the ship. With the rudder, we were also talking about maneuvering systems, which we have some other ways of maneuvering here too. This is the fine position adjustment system, where you can just control a bunch of thrusters to move the ship. So if we wanna move the bow port, we can do that. Stand starboard, we can also do that. We can also press two buttons at once to make it quicker. We can also adjust our forwards and backwards movements. These are obviously very slow and are meant to be used in docks. If you want something in between, you can press 3 to turn on the docking gear, which slows the ship down to around 50 knots. One thing you should know though is that these are connected to electric motors, so they drain electricity rather fast. For that I recommend using this lever for the generator. And you might be needing those thrusters, as for Stormworks this is rather big of a ship, coming in at 65 meters long and around 11 meters wide. She also weighs somewhere around 200,000 Stormworks mass. A lot of that mass is taken up by her car deck, which can accommodate around a lot of cars because it depends on the size of car. But for example, with these Toyota Rangers, the ship can take up to 12 cars. Now obviously there are some things you need to remember about this. That includes you have to use the parking brake because at 45 knots the cars are gonna move around. Also, remember that the ship may list or even capsize during loading if you load badly and if you load very heavy cars. One thing you also need to remember about this is very laggy when you use cars in it. And especially one piece of information you should remember is I don't recommend using this ship on multiplayer. But with capsizing that we were just talking about, one thing I need to give you information about is this thing has a dynamic damage system, which we will touch on later in the features section. And this thing can be turned off here. Now yes, this can load up to 12 cars, but this can also load passengers using the Stormlink mod, around 182 of them. Now I'm pretty much done with telling you all of this information and all of these specifications, so let's move on to the more interesting part with the features. So firstly, the vessel includes a bridge packed full of different features, decorations and interior. And that's where we are going to be staying for most of this segment of the video. So first off, let's go over this panel. This thing I'm rather proud of, and this is the lights panel. Here we can control all the nav lights we have. We can control the nameplate lights, that being this nice feature. And here comes in the more interesting part, that being that we can control our lights in 4 different ways. That being the default, we can just kind of turn on buttons in every room, or we can override a whole deck, or we can switch our lights to player sensors, and that will work on if it detects a player in a room, it will turn on a light, and if the player is out of the room, it will turn the light off. And we can also control our RGB lights. So we can just control the RGB values of our lights. Now moving on to this panel, here we have the sonar, which is from Workshop, and the lidar, how is it supposed to be pronounced, where we can change the range. This is partly from Workshop and partly made by me. Moving on to the main console, here we have a radar, we have a push to talk function, we have our fine position control system. We can lower our mast, that being another interesting feature designed for the ship to fit under bridges. We also have anchors, cameras, around 8 of them. An emergency transponder locator. Also behind us we see the panel of electrics and also an emergency release for the fuel rods. Here we can see the charges of the batteries, the generator lever, and the breakers, which this thing actually has functioning breakers. If we shut all this off, we aren't going to be able to use anything. These will also shut off if there is any water ingress in the electrics room. Talking about water ingress, here we have a map of flooding, and here we can go over all of the alarms the ship has. I'm not going to go over them now. We can also turn on our bilge pumps here. Here we have our weather monitors and our map monitors. This will take some time to load, but here we can just access a map. These are both from the workshop, by the way. But what isn't from the workshop is this whole ballast tank system, where we can fill our ballast tanks and empty them. We can also turn on the stabilization system. Here we have a coffee machine, but it's out of order, because this thing doesn't actually dispense liters of coffee. This thing is the multiplier for the dynamic damage system. So I think this is the perfect time to actually go over this system that creates faults on the ship. So the dynamic damage system is basically a giant glorified clock. This clock counts down from a time of, let's say, 3 hours, which is the normal time there usually is. And when it counts all the way down, it's going to break something. It's either going to create a leak or make an electric fault or something like that. There are 9 of these clocks on the ship, and there are 3 leaks, 3 electric faults, and 3 miscellaneous. But it's not only about the time, it is also about the conditions outside, because this clock takes in a bunch of different variables, let's say humidity, and these variables can lower its time. So some clocks may take in wind, some others may take in humidity, some others may also take in rain, and some others may take in all of the 3. That is also where this thing comes in. This thing is used to simulate those conditions. You can plug in any number from 1 to 5, 5 being the worst conditions. That decreases it to still a lot of time. So there is another way of making these faults. If we go into the helm, press key 6, we can open the faults room, this smaller room on the car deck. And here we can just access all of the faults. For example, leaks. And now it's yelling at us that it has a leak. But let's say there's a real leak. That's where the rafts come in handy. These are located in 2 places around the ship, that being behind this door on the starboard side and behind this one on the port side. They're sealed behind doors to not damage them during bad weather, and also to make the ship look better. Now you may think, these are small little tiny things, how are they going to help with anything? Well, firstly, these are rather stable, and secondly, if we jump here into the water, with the power of XML magic and duct tape, we can inflate them. And now we have a big raft that can float rather well in waves. Like, it's not that bad, doesn't tip over. Talking about stability, this thing also features a weight stabilizer that is down inside the ship in the ballast. And talking about ballast, this thing has a lot of small interesting areas down here. For example, this place where you can find the batteries. And oh, what's this button? Well, this thing repairs a leak or anything that's been broken. So for example, if there is one of the electric failures, that being the rudder trim fault, we can go right in front of the helm, press this, and that's going to reset the timer and repair it. We can find these buttons everywhere. With it being a car ferry, the cars need to get on in some way. So we have big doors and ramps at the stern. And also at the bow we have a visor, if you can call this that, because this is not really a visor. I will show you how these work. Now behind the bridge we have a docking operator room. Here we can select systems, that just turns on a bunch of cameras and things like that. And here we can either open stern doors, or control the stern ramps, or control the bow visor, bow ramps, bow door, or the magos. We can also control our position with the fine position adjustment system. But we also have this nice button, that being the control from car deck button. If we turn this on, we will be able to control everything from here. So let's do door. That's going to slam us in the face. But now here we can click this, and this just pushes this out and opens it. Basically a big mouth. Here we can also control the ramp much better. We are able to control all of these 3 parts. The upper part, this one. The lower part, this one. and the middle one. That's the middle one, yeah. This one. So we are able to just push it like this. The same controls can be found on the stern, but there is no visor, there's just door and the ramp. To end this video off on a relaxing note, there is also a pool on this ship. Be mindful with this in waves and when sailing because it can spill over. And in my opinion this looks rather nice with the skylights. And as you can see by this room, the ship has a rather decorated interior overall. We can even buy Kentucky Fried Kitten here. Well, sorry for just telling you what that meant. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy the ship if you've subscribed to it on the workshop page. I hope you learned something from this. And see ya!